spiritual journey, for me anyway, is about simply remembering to breathe. And yet it's the very thing when I'm most stressed or anxious I forget to do. And so I'm going to invite us to start this time together by joining together to take a deep and cleansing breath. To the count of 8, if you will join me, take a moment and take this breath. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then let's take another deep breath, and at the end of this one, I invite you to let out an audible sigh. Ready? 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah. I recently read that a sigh will naturally occur after some tension, bless you, whether due to positive stress or negative stress. And the body self-regulates by taking this breath or this sigh. And so as I was reflecting on this, I'm not sure what's going on. As I was reflecting on this, I thought about this natural tendency around the breath, around the in-breath and the out-breath, the intake and the outtake, and how that's part of the natural rhythm and cycle of existence. So with this, I'd like us to take an experiment here. I'm going to ask you now to take a deep breath, but then without exhaling, take another deep breath. So together. And then again. Now exhale. So chances are, if you did the assignment correctly and actually took a real deep breath, on your second breath, it was harder to take a full breath, right? So that's true with our breath. So I'm going to invite us now to do another experiment. Imagine the home that you currently live in. Could be your parents' house, could be a rented house or a home you own, but the place where you currently live. Imagine, just picture yourself there with all of the furniture as it is, clean or messy as it normally is. And then now imagine if everything that you have ever purchased, received as a gift, inherited, you had to store in the current house that you live in. Yeah. Just take a moment to really imagine what that would be like. Would you be able to even walk around in this house? Would it all even really fit in this house, or would it be overflowing? Picture your house filled with everything that you have ever received or purchased. Now I'm going to invite us to consider this same analogy in consciousness with respect to our minds. So what if, in this thought experiment, you had to hold in consciousness every single belief or thought or feeling that you have ever entertained in your life? Imagine. Just take a moment now to really imagine that. Every emotion that has crossed my path, every single thought I have ever entertained, everything I've ever believed in throughout my life. Imagine. I did this thought experiment this week for myself Because in considering the power of renunciation, which is essentially our capacity to let go, the first thing that comes up when I think about letting go is my personal resistance to change of any kind, right? So when people tell me about the need and the desire to let go, the first thing that comes up is, oh, I don't like change unless I instigated it, right? And so the first idea is like the desire to hold on. So in my mind, I reversed that. I thought, holy, what if I could only hold on? What if I was forced to hold everything that I have ever received materially or in consciousness, right? I would be overwhelmed. My thoughts would be clouded. They would be battling in my mind because I've believed conflicting thoughts throughout my life, right? And so I want to consider this because most of us are not fond of this idea of letting go. But to me, even worse is the corollary. What if we did not have this capacity to let go? So let's focus on how amazing this thing is, our capacity to let go. Our capacity to let go is foundational to our health on multiple levels. It's foundational to our health physically, right? Naturally, we take in oxygen, we breathe out carbon dioxide mostly. If we were not able to do that, we would literally die. But there's also the process of blood circulation. And we take in food and we eliminate food or we would die. This is the way our body naturally works. This is the way it works in order to be healthy. And when it is healthy, this moves along, right? But also in our material world, in our homes, imagine like if we were never able to take out the garbage, if the garbage person never came, right? And everything we used, we just had to hold on there. There is something so natural and healthy to this process of circulation in our system. But then finally, and most important here, in unity, I want to focus on our power to let go when it comes to the spiritual, otherwise known as the realm of consciousness. So Reverend Dr. Paul Hasselbeck, in his book Power Up, which is about the 12 powers, says, where there is inflow or increase, there must also be outflow and release. The Dead Sea, he says, is void of life because there is inflow, but no outflow. So today, I want to talk about the power of outflow, letting go in our consciousness as it affects our spiritual journey. Because again, chances are, if you're like me, if you have ever grown or changed in your life, you know that what I believe right now is actually in opposition, would be battling with what I believed back then. Or if I had all of these beliefs built up over me, within me over time, it would actually paralyze me. I wouldn't be able to make decisions because there'd be the voices of everything that was ever thought by me. And so today, we want to focus on this amazing power of release. I want to first talk about what exactly is this power we call the power of renunciation here in Unity. Second, I want to talk about how exactly it is vital to our spiritual unfoldment. And then finally, I want to talk about the how, because a lot of times people say, well, just let it go. Right? Let it go, but how? So I want to talk a lot about the process today, and then we'll have an opportunity to practice it together as we enter into a time of meditation that Victor will lead us into. So first, what is the power of renunciation as we share about it here in Unity? Well, renunciation has been described in many ways by the different Unity authors. It is our power to exhale, to release, to forgive, to eliminate, and to remove. And in addition, having removed and eliminated, it's also, the corollary is it's our power to say no. to be the gatekeeper of our own consciousness, of our own time. So the power to release that which no longer serves us, and the power to be a gatekeeper, to say no, to preserve that which does serve us, and focus on that. So that's the power of renunciation. Very simple words: let go, release, eliminate. Given that these are such simple words, why did I decide to keep this word renunciation? Well, one of the reasons is that I like big words. So that's just kind of how I am. The other reason is that Charles Fillmore used this term in the original publication of the 12 Powers in his original teaching. And related to that, it's important to use this term because vital to what we do here in Unity is that we redefine or retranslate what might be a more literal definition of the Bible and of these ideas. And so renunciation, what many of us might relate to as something very long-suffering, right? About letting go in certain worldly sense, like letting go of sexuality, like letting go of our humanity. Here in Unity, I want to be able to reframe what this exercise of renunciation means specifically in this context. So those are some of the reasons why this term is so important. And I want to share that for those of us interested in a deeper study of this, Charles Fillmore also equated the 12 Powers with an apostle, in this case, Thaddeus, with a color, russet. I didn't own any, so I asked Victor to wear a kind of russet today. And I did ask him, I didn't make him, and again, and physically, it is, I mean, some of us don't like to think about it, but our lower bowels, you know, the power of elimination, literally, as well as figuratively. So some of us, when we focus on this as a deep study, might actually meditate on that center, like as a ganglionic center, a center of energy, where we practice psychological, emotional, as well as physical release of that which no longer serves us. And so that is the power of renunciation, our power to let go of that which no longer serves us. William Warch, in his book, How to Use the 12 Gifts from God, there are 3 slides because this is a long quote, but I'm going to start with the teaching, with the lesson, and then we'll move into the practice. He describes the power in this way: everything that is in existence has been brought forth through the affirmative power of faith or belief. It is drawn into existence from invisible spiritual energy. Renunciation does just the opposite. It takes from existence back to harmless creative energy. When something negative is removed from existence, it's called a cleansing of consciousness. Bible symbology illustrates this with the flood of Noah and the parting of the Red Sea. The flood took with it all the impurities of the world, and the closing of the sea removed all threats. So the letting go, and then the power to say no. The flood took with it all the impurities of the world, and the closing of the sea removed all threats. This is why water baptism is used in preparation for receiving of the Holy Spirit. So there was a great deal of turmoil, right, preceding the flood and the closing of the seas. Therefore, he teaches, if there is a great deal of current turmoil in your life, to the point that you feel overwhelmed, it is time for you to let go and let God. If you do, you will experience a personal cleansing, and your life will have new meaning. The negative forms will weaken in structure until they are reduced and returned to pure potential, which is waiting to be brought back by you into existence for good. I loved reading this, even though it was written decades ago. As a minister, you might imagine that during the week, I counsel a good number of people. I'm in classes where people are sharing about their lives. You just have to turn on the news, though some of us don't want to see the level of struggle and overwhelm that is in the world. But what I also see a lot, and I see it a lot among Unity or New Thought Truth students, is this. There's this sense of like, I don't like what's going on in my life. It's too much. I can't handle it. But I'm going to keep trying to handle it myself. I don't let go and let God. I just want to use some of these spiritual principles, and then I'll be in control, and I'll fix it with these principles, right? So there's that sense of taking the principle for our own ego's use. But this idea of this cleansing, Noah's ark, right? So Noah built this great ark, but that's not the same. The consciousness that built the ark is us saying, yes, I'm ready to be cleansed. But that's different from the higher consciousness that sweeps in and does the cleansing. Because we must reach for a consciousness larger and greater than our own in this case to do that work. So our work is merely the conscious decision to become willing to release and let go. Anyone who's tried, I don't know about you, but I've never consciously created willingness. I've only chosen to be willing. I've only chosen to be willing to forgive. That's my boat. I built it. And then I let that energy that is bigger than me sweep in to do the work of cleansing. That is the work of the Spirit that is within us, but that is also more powerful than our egoic consciousness alone. Overwhelmed, stressed in any area of your life, chances are it's not just about doing more affirmations. There is a sort of modern day consumer attitude that we have been so habituated in, that even as we approach the spiritual journey and look at the stuff, we're like, ooh, I love those Hay House affirmations about my body being perfect and whole. I want these affirmations. I'm going to affirm oneness and love. But boy, I do not want to forgive certain political figures or my neighbors. I just want to keep affirming love, but I don't want to forgive. I don't want to let go of that, right? I want to know that, yes, I am a child of God and worthy of all joy. But you better not make me let go of my well-earned, prideful self-concept as being that long-suffering giver in my life, right? So I invite each of us to consider what it is that we have been wanting more of. What aspect of good that we have been inviting into our lives that might be stuck? Because there is that which doesn't match in consciousness in our house, that which doesn't match, which we don't want to give out yet, right? Which we're still hoarding and holding on to. What might that be? Usually it's the corollary. If we want more love, but we haven't forgiven. If we want more prosperity, but we keep a sense of debtedness around other people's debtedness to us, then we are keeping inconsistent beliefs in our consciousness. Yeah? And so, as we claim the good that here in Unity we so much believe we are entitled to as expressions of the Most High, as children of God, as waves in the ocean, right? that even as we invite that, it is so important that we be consistent with that good, that we be aligned with it in our being. And so with that, I want to invite us to consider the second point in today, which is, yes, when we initially start on the spiritual journey, a lot of us do it because we are struggling, because we are stressed, and we simply want to feel better and we want to improve our lives. So there's the ego that says, hey, yeah, I'm going to use these principles and I'm going to apply them mostly psychologically to improve my life. But I'm going to invite us into another consideration, which is the idea, seek first the kingdom, all else will be added, is at core about consciousness. That when we seek first the consciousness of God and of oneness, when we seek first our own enlightenment and awakening, then all else that we really need would be added to our lives. This is the true journey of the 12 powers, not just to finagle our outer world and make it better, but to actually invite these faculties of mind within us to wake up to their spiritual aspects so that we can move about in this world knowing that the kingdom of heaven is among us, is actually right here present. And I know in every moment what I need will be added to me as I know that. But notably, the work of the 12 powers begins with faith. And so there's a slide that shows all of the powers that we've gone through this far. And what's notable is that renunciation is one of the last ones, right? 11 out of 12. But if you've been here on the journey with me, you know that actually, perhaps without consciously recognizing it, I've been inviting you to use the faculty of renunciation in a spiritual way at each stage in this journey. First, in faith. So whatever ways in which we have invested faith in our smarts, in our hard work, in our capacity, in those ways, sometimes those work and sometimes those fail. But the idea of spiritual faith is that we move from faith in the material body, even in the intellect, and apply that faith to divine ideas, to the knowing of truth. And what are some of those ideas? That you are whole and holy by nature, that you are loved and lovable inherently, not because you've done anything, not because you've sacrificed anything. And the trick to this is, so is everybody else entitled and deserving. Everybody else. And so faith then gets moved into the spiritual when we see that faith is really about faith in these grand divine ideas of truth. And then strength. Oh, the ways I've used strength and steadfastness to hold stubborn to my old beliefs, to hold stubborn to the ways I want to control and do something instead of being steadfast in my faith. When the world seems to present all these outer things that I'm affirming prosperity and suddenly I just lost my job. Staying steadfast in faith is about claiming that truth of potentiality in the midst of appearances to the contrary. And we do this with all our powers, wisdom. The wisdom, not, some people come in as like, I want to make a wise decision, but it's all for my worldly idea. Which is the best decision for me to make the most money? That's a worldly application of wisdom. Instead, what we want to be wise about is what choice are we making that will allow us to receive the fullest amount of good and to express that in this world, to receive truth and to express that, the application of wisdom. So during these 11 so far weeks, we've been working through this process. And so if you're new to here, just know that we have these on video so you can go back and reinforce and learn these practices for awakening each of our faculties into a higher demonstration, not because we should, not because it's something that God demands or wants of us, right? But because it alleviates our own suffering. Because it helps us to come into the kingdom of peace in our own hearts, to know our oneness, as some of us might know intellectually, but to know that oneness and to live from it. That is the purpose of renunciation in all of its faculties, in all of its expressions, up through today. So, to share a little bit about, I want to say something really quick about Romans. I think it's chapter 12, verse 2. Be ye transformed by the renewing of your minds. One of my favorite all-time quotes in the Bible. Be ye transformed. The renewing of our minds cannot happen without the spiritualization of our faculty of renunciation, of letting go. We don't control this process of that sweeping in of spirit within us. We just control whether we say yes or no to it in any given moment. But related to individuals building boats and such, whenever I think of the power of letting go, I'm always reminded of a famous Buddhist story. And in the story, this man is on a journey. They're always on this journey. And he comes across a river. A lot of rivers in the Buddhist tradition, too. Comes across a river, and he's on the bank, right? And on this side, it's like chaos. You know, the waters are treacherous, very dangerous and wild. And the man sees, though, that way across, you know, which is the way he's headed, is like peaceful, tranquil, and calm. He's like, oh man, I'm determined and I'm courageous and I'm going to get to the other side. And so he looks around, there are twigs and there's foliage, and he puts it all together and he builds himself a raft. And then, using his own arms, you know, he gets on the raft and he paddles, moves to the current, and he paddles hard, but he's determined. He sees the other side, and finally, yes, he makes it to the other side of the bank. Success, right? And so now imagine, suppose that you are this man and you're on the other side of the bank and you're getting ready and you're looking at land in front of you and you pick up the raft and you put it on your head and you start carrying it along with you, right? So suppose the man did this. If we saw him, if we watch, you know how when you watch a movie, you always know you're just stop, don't do it. We know it's not a good idea, right? And so this idea that this man would carry this raft is a little bit absurd. But the question is, of course, in what ways are we doing exactly this? What belief systems, what paradigms from our childhood, what enabled us to succeed in school well, what enabled us to even survive perhaps a violent household? What in there are we still carrying on our heads, even though we're on the safe side now, just hauling it along? So I invite you to consider that. What served you in the past that can now be left behind? Of course, there's a lot of faith in that. Faith in the fact that there are going to be materials later to build a new raft, that there's a new river, right? Maybe a better raft. When I reflected on the story, of course, I thought about my own limiting beliefs, if you will, from my own childhood. As many of you who've been coming regularly know, I've got the story from my childhood. Now, I still have the story. The question is whether I'll choose to live from it. But I had the story that I had to do everything on my own. Everything. And I was very self-reliant. I remember talking to my grandmother about how, like, my grandmother would cut up slices of oranges and hand them to my sister right next to me. And I would feel so unloved in that. I'd be like, I'm just sitting right here, like you didn't. And only later in life did I really have this conversation with her. She said, Nhien, of all the kids, the grandkids, 5, you always looked like you were completely independent. You always acted like you were doing everything on your own. So I was like living out the story and then, emitting this energy if I do everything on my own. And so she never felt like I needed her to do that. But then, of course, I could recognize this intellectually, but I was still out picturing it. In my relationships, I had before Victor, I had such horrible and rocky and challenging relationships. I did, actually. And they were very tumultuous. I was a little feisty. I was very feisty. But I remember when I was the most vulnerable. Only later did I realize I was doing this, when I was the most vulnerable and felt weak and needed people around me. I would strike up arguments with my partner. Like, I would like, well, and it was stupid reasons, I don't know what reason, so that they would leave me, and then I'd sit in my apartment, be like, see, I have to do it all alone. Limiting beliefs that we still carry around that keep us from the fullness of the good to which we are entitled as expressions of the divine. What do you see? One of the ways we can identify if we're still searching for that which is ours is that someone said once that they had a series of complicated and disturbing relationships, and they came to realize that there was one common element in all of them. Right? And so the pattern of the relationship that we usually attribute to that person, and every job, I keep quitting my jobs because every job I've had all these really competitive coworkers, right? It's all there, it's them. Even, less funny, abusive partners. But what we have control over is us. And the consciousness that believes in this or not this. What do we believe in? Sometimes if we're not conscious of it, we can see it outpictured, mirrored by those people, by the repetitious stories that arise in our lives. And again, the spiritual perspective on this is based on the idea that we fundamentally believe that each and every one of us is fully entitled to a vibrant, thriving life. That's the basic premise of our spirituality here. And so if we are not having that, what's the common problem? Me. That I haven't fully awakened to the possibilities that are here because I'm rewriting old stories that I'm holding on to, right? That I have yet to release. But a part of why we don't release them, not all of us like to cry. I haven't seen any kind of release process that didn't involve tears, right? But that feels very vulnerable. But it's a letting go. It's a grief when we let go of our own old beliefs, especially the ones like the raft. They're ones that feel like they never served us, but the raft, maybe you even gave the raft a name, you get attached to this thing that saved you, got you over the water, right? So consider that. Charles Fillmore, I don't think I have this up, but Charles Fillmore says, if the system has been burdened with congestion of any kind, a higher life energy will set it into universal freedom. But there must be renunciation, or letting go of old thoughts before the new can find place in consciousness. And now finally, and this won't take too long, I want to share about the specific how that we use here in Unity. And this how is called, it's a prayer tool that we use here in Unity. It's called Denials and Affirmations. In modern day, and if you're taking Paul Hasselbeck's class on Tuesday, he changes the word from denials to releases, because denial has some bad connotations, right? So I want to make a distinction here. Denial is not psychological denial. Denial owns the truth of the circumstances in the outer world while releasing the belief in the power of that over your present good. And the reason for this, it's a little tricky, so I'm going to slow down here. If there is only one power and one presence, as we teach here in unity, then no one and nothing can truly be against us. And there is no power fighting us. Therefore, the only power that these negative things have is what? The power that we've given to it. So the release is the taking back. I thought those things could keep me from my good today. I deny the power of any of those outer circumstances to keep me from my joy and my good. That's the denial and the release we're talking about. And earlier, when I invited you to take a deep breath, what did you do before that? How did you make room for that breath? Hopefully, you exhaled. Hopefully, you cleared your lungs before able to take that deep breath, right? And so this is where, again, the pop version of unity out in the world that's all about affirmations does us a disservice. Because before we can even get to the place of affirming and really claiming this new good, acquiring this new good, we have to exhale. So the denial is so important as we recognize what we must release so that this truth can be held in consciousness without a battle of that life experience over my present joy. I deny the fact in circumstance that my checking account looks like this over my ability to be abundant and prosperous in this moment. And as I claim this truth and release sight of the old, I can see the ways in which I need to take the next right step into owning my own prosperity. But I first must deny these things rather than repeat them as complaints to our friends, right? We repeat the complaints. So, I think our last slide for today, I'm going to close this time and then invite us into the practice here. William Warch, again, how to use your 12 gifts from God. Renunciation is entirely an inner process. Do not try to deny away disease, personalities, and outer conditions. If you're an alcoholic, admit that you're an alcoholic, but deny the power of that to keep you limited. You see the difference? Do not try to deny away disease, personalities, and outer conditions. Denials are actually used on your own beliefs and attitudes, not on outer things. You are adjusting your consciousness to the good, to God, to the good, rather than trying to rearrange the world.